Okay, everyone, I guess we can get started. Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Vicky Simkovic. I'm the coordinator with the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, and I'm excited to be introducing our panelists today and hosting this webinar on garlic mustard, a how-to guide for removal. This webinar was made possible by a grant partnership with the City of London's Adopt-an-ESA program and funding provided by the TD Friends of the Environment Foundation, and we're very thankful to their support. The goal of this project was for the OIPC to develop resources to support the City of London's new Garlic Mustard Adopt-a-Patch program, which in addition to this webinar will include a toolkit for removing garlic mustard and fact sheet. Garlic mustard removal events are great outreach tools, and through this webinar, we hope that you will gain knowledge and inspiration, whether it's planning a similar Adopt-a-Patch program or garlic mustard pulling event in your area, or perhaps you're from the London area and would like to join their Adopt-a-Patch program, or would like some tips on what to do with garlic mustard in your own area. We hope that there will be some value to everyone. I will begin by first giving an overview of garlic mustard. Why it's a threat, its biology and life cycle, identification and lookalikes, and best practices for its control. I would also like to give a warm welcome and brief introduction to our panelists. Linda McDougall is an ecologist with the City of London in city planning. City planning leads and implements natural heritage protection policies, conservation master plans, ecological restoration plans, and facilitates community stewardship programs to protect London's environmentally significant areas. Rebecca Smythe is an adoptee of the Kilally Meadows Adopt-an-ESA program with their Hike and Bus program. Nousheen Ahmed is a natural resource specialist focusing on invasive species management for the City of Toronto. And just some quick housekeeping reminders before we get started. If you have any questions for our panelists about garlic mustard, please write them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen at any time during the presentation. You'll also see a chat box, a chat option. Use this to let us know if you're having any technical difficulties. And also feel free to introduce yourself. We'd love to know where everyone is from. Okay, so most of you are probably pretty familiar with garlic mustard. It's a familiar sight throughout Southern Ontario, especially around this time of year when it's flowering. It grows in abundance throughout Southern Ontario and is now found as far north as the Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury, and North Bay. It's a highly invasive plant from the mustard or Brassicaceae family. This means it's closely related to things like kale, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts. It was introduced by European settlers in the late 1860s as a culinary and medicinal herb. The biggest threat of garlic mustard is its ability to invade mature deciduous forest communities. Garlic mustard can spread quickly through a forest understory, outcompeting native plants like wildflowers and tree seedlings and reducing biodiversity. It owes its success to a number of reasons. It produces an extensive number of seeds. Each plant can produce hundreds of seeds that then remain viable in the seed bank for at least 5 years. The roots release chemicals in the soil that also inhibit mycorrhizal fungi. These fungi are beneficial fungi that help trees and plants absorb nutrients and water into their roots. It also has no natural predators in North America. It produces toxic chemicals that make it an unfavorable choice. So in particular, it's a threat to 2 butterfly species. The mustard white, for example, was once a much more common butterfly species, but it has declined in numbers in the past decades, due in part to garlic mustard invasions. These butterflies both feed on plants from the mustard family and will often confuse garlic mustard for an edible mustard plant. But unfortunately, garlic mustard contains a toxin called sinigrin that is toxic to both eggs and larvae. Garlic mustard completes its life cycle in 2 years. In the spring, you'll often see tiny seedlings such as this and basal rosettes that blanket the forest floor. The basal rosettes then remain photosynthetically active into fall and winter, which gives them a competitive advantage in the spring as they have an early head start to growth. The following year, the plants go into flower in May to early June and then go to seed. The seed pods are in these narrow capsules, and as the plant matures and the pods dry out, they release seeds, which the seed release can happen from late summer and even into early November, and some are even able to retain seeds over the winter. In ideal conditions, plants can produce up to 150 seed pods, and each seed pod contains 10 to 20 small black seeds. Most seeds are dropped within 1 to 2 meters of the parent plant, so they don't get dispersed very far. They're not wind or water dispersed, and they're usually dormant for at least 1 year in the soil prior to sprouting. So just a little bit of identification. The first years are found in these low-lying basal rosettes with leaves that are heart or kidney shaped and have these they're coarsely toothed, and they also have a garlicky smell when they're crushed. That's very characteristic. In their second year, the flowers are similar to many other to plants in the mustard family. They're four-petaled and white. The seeds are in the narrow capsules. The plant reaches a height of about 1 meter, and the leaves of the second years are more arrowhead shape. The leaves have jagged edges and a pointed tip. Garlic mustard spreads from a core population and forms satellite populations about 1 to 2 meters from the plant. Within 4 to 5 years, this area fills in with more seedlings. A core patch from here can double in size every 4 years and can dominate a forest understory within just a few years. So it also tends to grow in an advanced retreat pattern because it has a 2-year life cycle. You can have many rosettes and few flowering plants in 1 year, and few rosettes and many flowering plants in another year, which can make it look like the population is constantly expanding and contracting, which can be a little confusing when you're conducting control. So how do you control garlic mustard? Well, for the purpose of this webinar, I'll be focusing on the most common and easiest method for controlling garlic mustard, which is by hand pulling. This method is quite effective for small to medium-sized infestations and is quite successful if done over multiple seasons. There are other methods of control for garlic mustard, and if you're interested, I would encourage you to visit the OIPC website, download our BMP and technical bulletin to find out more. And we also have a quick reference guide with it's a pocket guide for IDing invasive plants in the field. And if you have any specific questions, please ask in the Q&A feature. The best time to pull garlic mustard is before they've set seeds, so during or before flower, and to focus more on the second year plants, so around April to May is the best time. And you want to focus on second year plants as your goal is to deplete the seed bank, and it tends to be easier to pull the second year plants. And pulling isn't very difficult. You grasp at the base of the plant and pull out the entire root to prevent resprouting. It's easier to do when the soil is soft and after some rainfall. If you're having any difficulty, a trowel or similar tool can assist. And as you're pulling, you'll notice the roots themselves have a S or J shape to them, especially the younger roots. And here I have a demonstration of me pulling garlic mustard in a forest. So as you can see here, the root came out fairly easily for me. It was fairly easy to pull out in this soil, but sometimes it can be a lot more difficult. And you want to get as much of the root as you can, because the roots can grow adventitious shoots if they're not entirely removed. So some things to keep in mind: you're always going to create a little bit of soil disturbance when you're hand pulling, but you want to try to minimize that as much as possible. But the disturbance that's created will stimulate germination of seeds in the seed bank, and that's partly the reason why it's so important to continue the control measures at the same site for multiple years. So at least 5 years to deplete the seed bank, and more than once in a season, ideally. So it's not per se that hand pulling itself is difficult, but more that it needs to be done persistently. And my advice would be to not give up, even if it feels like you're not making progress. Hand pulling is still quite effective, and you can see a big difference if you're persistent. And it's also a good idea to prioritize. It's best to start with removing outlying plants like isolated or satellite populations first to prevent further spread, and consider replanting the area with native species. There's some evidence that replanting with certain native species can help outcompete the seed bank. And disposal. Disposal is also one of the most important aspects of control. When you're disposing, it's important that you don't just discard flowers in the natural areas and you don't compost them. So use a black plastic bag or yard waste bag. And here I have an example of a plant that I pulled while it was in flower from its roots. And as you can see, a few weeks later, it's popping up and producing and going to seeds. So it's important to make sure you're disposing in black plastic bags or yard waste bags, and then you're sending it to just a regular disposal garbage site. Another way you can use garlic mustard is to eat it. It's quite a tasty plant. All parts of the plant are edible, and there are many different recipes online. Here are a couple links to some examples. There's just the list of things you can do with garlic mustard keep growing, and it's quite a tasty plant. There are also some lookalikes to look out for, such as violet species in the spring. Especially, they can look similar to the low-lying basal rosettes of garlic mustard. Violet species have more angled shaped leaves and more regular spaced teeth compared to garlic mustard, which is more wide and coarsely toothed. And garlic mustard also has a characteristic garlic smell. Creeping Charlie or ground ivy has a similar leaf shape to garlic mustard. It's more coarsely toothed, and the leaves are a little bit smaller, and they go as runners along the ground, and they have these square stems because it's from the mint family, and if you crush it, it'll have a characteristic mint smell to it. Dame's rocket as well is another non-native invasive plant from the mustard family. It has these pinkish purple flowers and grows in abundance. It starts flowering just slightly after garlic mustard, and because of how much it spreads like garlic mustard, sometimes people might confuse a species. Okay, and with that, I will pass it on to Linda.
Thanks, Vicki. That was great. So much great information, and I loved the recipes. That was just the best. Thank you. So I'm going to describe some initiatives and projects and things that the City of London has been doing with regard to invasive species. Overall, the city began controlling and managing invasive species back in 2006, and we're pleased to report that back in 2017, London City Council approved the London Invasive Plant Management Strategy, and we are in fact the first city in Ontario to have a comprehensive municipal invasive plant management strategy. Fortunately, over the last 10-15 years, adopter groups and friends of groups have been already helping to manage invasive species, including garlic mustard, to leverage the important work that we also have done by licensed professionals. And that work by licensed professionals is continuing now through the COVID crisis, whereas the volunteer work, not so much. I'll have to wait on that. Next slide. Thanks, Vicki.
Yep. There we go.
So that London Invasive Plant Management Strategy is a great document. It's available online. In that strategy, there were 5 species identified as priorities, and then there were a number of species identified on the watch list, and those are controlled as time and funds permit, and that includes garlic mustard. Fortunately, hand pulling is really effective, as Vicki was showing us, and can be done by volunteers, so it's a great fit for the Adopt-a-Patch, Adopt-an-ESA groups to continue to do. As Vicki pointed out, those infestations of garlic mustard grow and can get quite large. And one of the strategies that the Ontario Invasive Plant Councils and others have identified is to focus on something called an early detection rapid response approach. So that's what we're recommending through this Adopt-a-Patch program, is that we're going to help folks identify those areas of least invasion first. And we've created a number of maps and things based on conservation master plans, ecological restoration plans, showing those opportunities for wins where it isn't already such a huge infestation that it will take, you know, hundreds of volunteers, years to control the garlic mustard. We want to identify the prevention scenarios and have people act on those. So in London, we also fund the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority staff to help us with invasive species management, including in some of the most sensitive habitats we have in London, habitats that are so sensitive we have to get a permit from the province to control goutweed and garlic mustard in those areas. And we have retained Dillon Consulting to help us with that permitting. We've got 5 years of monitoring reports required as part of that permitting, showing the success we're having in protecting some of the most sensitive special species at risk habitats in London from garlic mustard and goutweed. We're very proud of that, and that's described also in the federal recovery strategy for the false root anemone in Canada. Next slide. So as I was mentioning, Adopt-an-ESA groups help to implement conservation master plans and ecological restoration plans. So those plans are developed with professionals doing 3-season inventory, identifying all the habitats and the species that are present, and identifying those opportunities for those wins where we don't have a lot of garlic mustard present yet. Last year, I want to thank Emily Williamson, the city ecologist, and Jessica Wakefield, our summer student, who worked on creating specific garlic mustard maps for people to adopt a patch. So through this program, the Adopt-a-Patch program, the city is going to provide folks with this webinar, a kit with the tools that Vicki described. So it's a nice bucket with a trowel and some gloves, and then the how-to guide. And then we can help people in 2021, because we can't roll it out in 2020, with all the things they'll need to start the process. And we're going to host a number of these workshops and help folks identify the garlic mustard, help people with removal and all those good things. Unfortunately, that's been postponed till 2021, but we're still proceeding with what we can. So once it's safe to gather in 2021, we'll hold those events next spring and train people on the ground. So here's a sample of one of the maps that Jessica Wakefield and Emily Williamson created. This is from Kilally Meadows ESA. Based partly on the ecological restoration plan for the area. And one of the findings in that ecological restoration plan identified that Kilally is an example of an area where garlic mustard really hasn't taken hold. And it was only found in 4 of about 100 polygons. So we have a great opportunity for a win. So there's all kinds of city programs and ways to get involved to protect habitat in London. The Neighborhood London program has things like Tree Me and neighborhood decision making, and all kinds of funding and volunteers and things are available for people to get together with the community once it's safe to do so, and do great things to protect London's environment. And these are some of the other programs besides the Adopt-an-ESA program. So we want to thank the Ontario Invasive Plant Council. We've been working with them for years on all kinds of important projects, including this London invasive plant management strategy, and they said all kinds of nice things about us in a newspaper article, and those are on your screen here. So, and there's a link to the London invasive plant management strategy there that was adopted by council. And then we also received a commendation from the National Invasive Species Center for our work with the OIPC, and also for our work with the Adopt-an-ESA groups, recognizing that London is enabling community-led engagement around invasive species control. So this is just another example of that great work and the amazing volunteers that we have in London. And we're so fortunate that people are willing to step up and help to protect the natural areas in their community. So I want to thank all our amazing dedicated Adopt-an-ESA volunteers, and of course TD Friends of the Environment for the grant. And please reach out and contact myself or the other city ecologists about the Adopt-a-Patch garlic mustard program. Sadly, we weren't able to roll out the demonstration events in 2020, and garlic mustard is going to cease soon, so we really won't be able to do much of the garlic mustard control this year, but certainly with the community. But in 2021, we will roll this out again, and we'll look forward to meeting you all and helping you get started on your journey of garlic mustard control. And I guess I'm going to pass it now to my amazing colleague and friend, Rebecca Smythe, who adopted Kilally Meadows maybe 6-7 years ago now, and has done amazing things in Kilally. And it's my pleasure to pass to Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Linda. As a community member of the City of London, it is such a treat to be involved in a small way with the removal of invasive plants that are plaguing Ontario, as you outlined. And you know, we're very, very fortunate to live in this city with the various programs, and we've had amazing support from Linda, who has made these programs. Because I think for a lot of us, we would like to do something. We don't have the expertise. We really enjoy, like every one of us who obviously is listening in, the natural areas. It's been pointed out with COVID-19 how the trails and the natural areas are such a refuge for all of us, as we are limited with what we can do at this time, working from home and things like that. So so that we've been, with the support of Lisa, or Linda, beg your pardon, it's a very good outline for the Adopt-an-ESA. It's so it's a tried and true program set up through Linda in the City of London for us to safely engage in the removal of invasive plants, which is for some of us a very exciting thing to be able to do, frankly, because it is really a shame to see how they move in. So as Linda was saying, we happen to have great expertise through the city, through Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, in what they accomplish in the best practices in the removal of invasive plants. There are garlic mustard, as you outlined, it is one that we can, as individuals, pull. So, and also we found Himalayan balsam too. So in the beginnings, we were just, you know, promoting and on Facebook and trying to get people out, and we did have some numbers, and this was beginning in 2015. In 2019, I think we have experienced greater success in the 11 hikes that we led, Eco Tuesday hikes, we call them. So they took place after work, so with the hope that it could be convenient for people. And we topped out for numbers at like, I think around 20 to 25 people. Sometimes we would have a smaller group, and but it was really it was successful in that we saw that people really enjoyed it. So I was wondering if you could switch to the next slide, Vicki. Thank you. So Linda has covered this in her information, but as you know, this is such a diverse area, and so including, we have Carolinian areas right in London. We're very fortunate to have these because it enables great diversity of wildlife, including birds, insects, etc. So, due to many factors, including favorable environmental conditions, the nature of our industrial and urbanized society, population density, large quantity of imports, the geographical location and close proximity to multiple access points to the American border, and the degraded habitat and ecosystems in the ecological regions, we've lost a lot of land, but we also have a very large number of invasive species compared to any other province or territory. So next slide. Thank you. So I just wanted to include some pictures to feature and highlight the beauty of Kilally Meadows, and also, you know, all of southwestern Ontario and Ontario. So, and Kilally itself is quite unique in that it has 17 vegetation communities, and they're listed here. So, and Linda referenced our ecological plan. So the restoration plan is the mapping is really extraordinary in the restoration plan for the city, for Kilally Meadows, that was done in 2018-19. So it also highlighted ways in which volunteers can assist. So that was excellent. Like in the overview, the invasive species monitoring, habitat restoration and rehabilitation. And there is a complete list of all of the species in Kilally Meadows. So it's a good reference for us because we like also the hikes to be interpretive. Now, these are 2-hour hikes, and we include half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour of invasive plant removal, ideal for the removal of garlic mustard and Himalayan balsam. So they're relatively easy to pick. They're often frequently easy to remove from Kilally because it's near the river, so the soil is moist, and it's rewarding. And I think the view is it's just some collective altruism for what all the trails give to us. Our trails, half of them are accessible in Kilally, and the other half is natural. They're used by really thousands of people in the City of London, and I feel like there is quite an uptick in people's interest in giving back, and that's all we're trying to do, is to work with the municipality, to learn from them, to be guided from them, and to assist in a small way. And so here you'll see the amazing hackberry. We have quite a few hackberries, and also the River Thames, Deshkan Zibi, and a winter scene of Kilally, the trail. Next slide, Vicki. So these are the identified in the ecological restoration plan. These are species of special concern. And so, yeah, you can just see them listed there. They're quite beautiful as well. Next slide. So Kilally is very diverse, as mentioned before. And there were over 700 species included in the ecological inventory. And and also the species of special concern. And next slide. So here are some of the birds. There are many more. There are hundreds of birds that have been identified in Kilally, 45 butterflies, and there are 350 acres. And the number of plant communities supports a diversity of birds and wildlife, as mentioned before. So it's quite an extraordinary place all times of the year. Next slide. Here are some other beautiful plants, including spring ephemerals, and we have some massive eastern cottonwoods in Kilally. And this is, to all of us, common lands, if you will, and it is owned by the City of London, and as I mentioned, enjoyed by so many people of all ages and all walks of life and ability. So, just to be able to do a little bit of something to keep it healthy is really all we like to do. And I believe at this time, many people are interested in doing this and have, when they've seen us, removing some invasives, we get quite a bit of interest. People asking what we're doing, and then with these hikes, it has really assisted through Thames Valley Trail Association that we're able to use their meetup site. That's what's enabled us to get some greater numbers, is through the Thames Valley Trail Association hikers that have expressed interest, and people in general on Meetup. And it's also advertised through the Thames Valley Trail Association website. In addition, we have an Instagram page and a Facebook page. And as I said, we couldn't do any of this without the assistance of Linda McDougall, the City of London. And so it's a rewarding social time when and you really feel at the end of it, you have done something, you've had some exercise, and you've given a little bit back to the ESA, which it needs. And the next slide, Vicki. And again, some of the beauty and the diversity of Kilally. Yeah. So yeah, you can see the bee balm, and we have quite a few sycamores, and we have some very beautiful forest areas in the lowlands around Meander Creek. And the sycamores look quite stunning in the winter because we use these trails all year round. So, and that is all I'd like to say. And I thank you for this opportunity. And we really appreciate it, everything everyone is doing in the Ontario Invasive Plant Council. Thank you so much, Vicki.
All right, thank you very much, Rebecca.
Appreciate it.
Great. That's great. And now we'll pass it on to Nousheen.
Hi, everybody. Hi, my name is Nousheen Ahmed. I work for the City of Toronto as a natural resource specialist. I want to talk to you about a garlic mustard monitoring program that we had undertaken for many years in Toronto. So this first slide is a nightmare. It's a huge patch of garlic mustard in a forest where we just had undertaken quite a lot of buckthorn control. It's in North York. And now the next slide that Vicki has just shown us is, this is High Park. It's where our restoration program formally started. In 2000, we started an in-house crew to deal with invasive species and their management. This is, can you go back please, Vicki?
Yeah, I think it's doing it by itself, sorry.
I think my presentation is a little possessed. So this is High Park. This is a section close to Bloor Street. You wouldn't even guess that just a few meters away there's a subway station. It's quite incredible. You step off the subway and you're in this beautiful forested, actually this is a savanna ecosystem, this beautiful savanna paradise. Can you please hit the next slide? So as I said, we started our in-house natural resource worker program in Toronto. The first crew started in High Park in 2000. In 2000, from 2000 to 2002, we undertook many different ways of dealing with invasive species. We're experimenting to try and find the best way of dealing with specific species. So we follow the tenets of IPM, and can you please go back? Mm-hmm. We follow the tenets of IPM, and with that, we go from the least harmful method to try and find the most effective method. So we'll always go from least harm to try and find the most effective method. So you can see, can you hit the next slide, please? Perfect. Yeah. That's perfect. Thank you, Vicki. So you can see those little yellow circles are circling these pigtails that show a monitoring plot. And so this monitoring plot has, this is no longer active, was being used for about 15 years in this same location in High Park. And we wanted to monitor how effective our garlic mustard removal methods were going. We tried many different methods. We tried tarping, we tried pulling, we tried cutting at the various growth stages. We didn't try any chemical methods to get rid of garlic mustard. Okay, next slide, please. So the pigtails on the previous slide show the outline of the plot. So the first year we didn't have this wooden system. It is a 1-by-1 square, and we used it, we placed it in the same location every year. First week of June, we pulled it out of storage and we placed it on the ground in that same location. It was GPS. And we, can you please go back? Thank you. And we inventoried everything in that square. We counted every individual stem of garlic mustard found in that square, and inventoried every plant that was found in and in the immediate vicinity of that square. Next slide, please. So the first year is 2002. You can barely see the edges of the plots. It was chock-a-block full of garlic mustard. The second year, 2003, there is very little garlic mustard in there. But if you, can you hit the next slide, please? So we wrote down our results. We went to sort of get an idea of what we were finding. And so you can see in the first year we've counted, and I feel really bad for these people who had to count every single stem in a 1-by-1 square. They counted 549 garlic mustard stems. And they pulled all of this as they were counting it. And then the next year there were none. But in the 2004, the third year of this project, the numbers had increased. which actually is to be expected because there is a seed bank that, that was there. But you can see as the years went on, the numbers became less and less. So some years there were 0, and some years we only had 3 and 4, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So this shows the evolution of the plot. So 2002, it was pretty much, actually I would say it is a garlic mustard monoculture. 2005, there was very little. Oh, I can see one stem right there. And 2008, there were a few stems in the plot, and most stems were outside of the plot. Next slide, please. Oh, back, please. Can you go back? Perfect. So,
Sorry, this is the right one?
perfect. That's absolutely perfect. So, garlic mustard, like most invasives, really likes disturbed areas. And you can see in 2013 and in 2015, it is very apparent DSB started moving into this area. So no garlic mustard, but DSV, which is unfortunate. So if you next slide, perfect. So we do, that's perfect, thank you. We do tackle garlic mustard throughout the city. This image here is from my cover slide. It's the same plots. We pull hectares of garlic mustard a year in-house, like many tens of hectares. I'm not sure exactly how much we pulled last year, and we're still doing it this year. Back, please. And it coincides with our planting season. Our planting season starts as soon as the ground thaws to mid-June. And during that time, while we're planting, we're pulling garlic mustard constantly. Unfortunately, we're not quite as good as we should be. We want to reduce the numbers of garlic mustard. So when we pull and we consolidate a large area into one single refuse pile. And we produce, as I would call it, a mega pile. So there are 2 mega piles there, which is kind of hard to see in these photos, unfortunately. And that reduces the spread of the garlic mustard. And then the next year we would come in, and then we have a smaller population to deal with, and then we would bag that and take that away with us. So that's how we would deal with a larger site and a larger infestation. So next slide, please. So we also do have volunteer efforts at the City of Toronto to deal with garlic mustard. Unfortunately, not this year. Coronavirus has really put a wrench into all of that. We will send volunteers to areas where the habitat is not quite as sensitive, where there are less vulnerable plants around, and our staff would generally go to areas where they have to be, you have to have a more delicate touch. So they would go to ESAs and other high quality habitat. So that is how we differentiate between volunteer and staff removal sites. So, yep, that is the end of my presentation.
All right, thanks so much, Nousheen.
No problem.
That was great. Okay, awesome. So those were our presentations, and now we have about 20 minutes for questions. I've seen there's a number of questions in the Q&A already. Feel free to keep asking, and let's go through and see. Either of us will answer. So what is the natural control factor of garlic mustard in Europe? So I'm thinking that's biocontrol.
I'm thinking it has natural predators.
Or natural, yeah. I know I've looked into this in terms of biocontrol, that there has been some work by Dr. Rob Rocher from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada they recently released the first biocontrol agent against garlic mustard in an area in Ontario in about 2018, and they were working with a center in Switzerland to find target species. So there is a weevil that they're currently looking at and doing field tests for weevil release sites, but so far there's no widespread release of any kind of biocontrol. Another question. Oh, I knew this would come up too. What native species do you recommend to discourage or replace garlic mustard? I have a slide here. So there's a number of different native plants that can help outcompete garlic mustard. And so these are some species that are listed in our best management practice guides. So there's some that can really, if you plant in abundance, can take over an area that has been pulled with garlic mustard. Virginia waterleaf is a really great one. And one thing I would suggest is, if you're in an area where you're pulling, is to take notice of any of native species around the area and see if you can help that native plant spread into the area where the garlic mustard is being pulled. Does anyone else have anything else?
I would recommend don't reinvent the wheel. You would plant something that's already growing there because you know it's going to thrive there. But that being said, choose something with a larger leaf that would offer larger leaf coverage or a denser leaf growth, like Virginia waterleaf grows a very dense leaf, or May apple also has a really wide leaf. It would help prevent the germination of the garlic mustard seedlings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good points. I noticed that bloodroot and mayapple were listed on one page of the best management practice, and then these species were also listed. So there's a good selection, and yeah, use your reference site, right? What's already succeeding and thriving in the area, and that'll help you choose.
Great. And oh, someone's asking, what is an ESA, Linda?
Oh, sure. It's an environmentally significant area. They are large natural areas in London that meet a number of criteria in the London plan and are protected to protect natural heritage and to, they're the largest part of our natural heritage system, and they're gems, and we protect them.
Right. And how long do the toxins last in the soil after garlic mustard is removed? So in terms of the allelochemicals. I know from our best management practices, they can last a number of years still after the garlic mustard is removed. And so sometimes the soil remediation is required, whether it's replacing with fallen logs or leaves to really get the mycorrhizal going again. I believe it's a few years. I can't recall the exact number. I have read there was a study that showed that over a long period of time, garlic mustard starts producing fewer toxins in its roots after maybe 20 or 30 years. Do any of you have any other insights?
I would say also be aware that the seed can stay viable in the seed bank for a good number of years. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe is viable for 30 years in the seed bank. I'm not sure if that's accurate. Yeah,
I've read different amounts. I've up to at least 5 years, somewhere around like 5 to 10 years is where what I've been aware of. Although it's definitely possible, it could be longer than that. And we got a couple disposal questions. If you're going on a hike and see some isolated plants but aren't prepared with a garbage bag, is there a good strategy?
I've been on the trail and I've picked garlic mustard in a number of times, like probably a lot of us have, and I just leave it. I hate to say it, but I just leave it in the middle of the trail and hope that people will walk on it. On my own property, I used to leave it on the laneway, and we used to drive over it with our car. No offense to the plant, but it's pretty tough.
I know for me, I've sometimes pulled it and put it in my backpack and then thrown it away in the garbage.
Yeah, that's a good way.
Yeah. Do you recommend disposing of all invasive species in black garbage bags, even though they don't spread by seeds, such as lily of the valley? I'd say it depends how they spread. So if they're also spreading by rhizomes and you're throwing the rhizomes away, like I would also recommend, like they could also spread. So I would say anytime you have an invasive plant with some kind of viable plant parts, whether it's a rhizomes, roots, then it's the best thing is to really dispose it in a black garbage bag and treat it as regular garbage. And again, even if it's gone to flower, it can still go to seed. So I think that would apply to most invasive plants, unless it's really early in the spring and it's like sometimes garlic mustard. There have been groups that have controlled like the first year plants, and they just use they have a compost on site where they put the first year plants, but that's kind of more of an exception. It's not the most ideal. So for one example is like there's a control that's happening on Peely Island, and it's just not practical for them to haul like garbage bags full of this to a disposal site. So instead they compost it right on the site, and they've monitored to make sure that it hasn't contributed to spread. Oh, this is a good question too. When is hand pulling not advisable? I have about 2,000 square feet of garlic mustard in the woods on my property. It seems daunting to hand pull it all.
I would hand pull it personally. You could cut it, then you run the risk of you have to cut it at a certain stage. You have to time it much more carefully, so it is more tricky that way. And then you also run the risk of cutting desired species then as well. But I would start pulling and find the center of your infestation and work from the outside in and just shrink it year by year. Just keep shrinking it and keep working at it year by year. It is possible to take care of a piece of property that big. Our crews do hectares of it, so many hectares of it every year, though that is a crew and that is what they're doing during their day-to-day. We have been able to control large populations of it throughout our city.
Yeah, it's amazing work. I have used in Kilally a scythe. There's some really nice lightweight scythe it's a large drift, and I'm sure I agree. Really pulling would be best. I'm not a botanist, but just through doing it over the years. But just to catch it before it goes to seed, and it's not ideal, but at least it makes you feel better.
Yeah. Hand pulling is usually best. Sometimes with these large infestations, like chemicals is usually just limited if you only have a pesticide license, and there's a lot of areas where it's not appropriate to use chemical. Hand pulling.
It's a good way to get rid of your frustration as well.
And it does feel productive, and you do see a difference if you keep doing it persistently. The next year there will be much less, and it's just a matter of going, and then also setting priorities. Like it may be too much to do the whole thing, but just controlling it at least in the most sensitive areas, or the areas where there's satellite populations. That can be a strategy. So trying to prioritize, or choosing to hand pull in one area and maybe do another strategy in another area.
Eventually it goes. I agree. We were talking, Vicki, for my own property, it was like over a 9-year period, and you do win out. And to this day, my daughter's still she is still picking now and again at 16 garlic mustard. So yeah, it's just in time it will go.
Another question. I live on 50 acres of woods with a creek running into the Thames. We have beautiful wildflowers all through it. However, the garlic mustard is encroaching on all sides of my property. I have been hand pulling for years and it takes me hours upon hours. I feel overwhelmed and I'm battling a lost cause. Is there anything more I can be doing? Any groups that would help? Maybe Linda, do you have any ideas?
Sure. So the best management practices provided by the Ontario Invasive Plant Council outline all of the options. And if it is your private property and you want to protect it the best way you can, perhaps consider retaining professionals to come and help you with that work, right? Just like you maintain your lawn or the other parts of your property, the city certainly retains professionals to help us control invasives throughout the environmentally significant areas, for example. So maybe you need some professional help. But if you wanted to try to get some volunteers to come and help, maybe that's fun too. And maybe it's one of those situations where you provide beer and pizza and people show up and help you. I don't know.
Another question, a question for Nousheen. Do you have plans to help control garlic mustard at Sir Sam Smith Park in South Etobicoke? It has really increased over the past 2 years.
I can't speak specifically about that project. My area of Toronto, unfortunately, is, it's North Toronto, it's north of the 401. I know that our crews do come into Sam Smith occasionally. I don't know if they have specifically targeted garlic mustard in this area. We have targeted all sorts of other invasive species in Sam Smith there.
And there's another question. What happened in High Park after the DSB moved in?
Well, DSB has always been in High Park. DSB, like most invasive species, thrives on disturbance. In a savanna ecosystem, it provides sort of circumstances that are very disturbance-like. And we have been treating DSB in High Park for the last 20 years. We have, and we will continue to treat DSB all throughout the city, in High Park and throughout the city.
Great. And there's a question here, how long has garlic mustard been invading? Well, in Toronto, the first record for Ontario was in 1879, on Ottawa in 1891, and Kingston in 1898. So it's been here for a while, but especially with increased urbanization and disturbance from recreational trails and increased development, the amount of garlic mustard has really increased over a number of years. And there's a number of things like deer and earthworms and human disturbances that really increase garlic mustard. And another one, so rather than composting these plants, using yard waste, is using yard waste bags a viable option? Does this run the risk of spreading seeds through municipal composting? I'm unfamiliar with how the yard waste bags are actually dealt with after pickup, to be honest. Maybe Linda or Nousheen, if you want to have.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's fine to put them in your compost in London, for example. I don't know that the compost process gets up to a high enough temperature to kill those seeds, though. So there is a chance when you're buying municipal compost that, you know what, it might have some invasive seeds in it. Just like any other soil or compost or product you buy, there's always that chance. So certainly when we're working with the Adopt-an-ESA groups and others, we're going to be taking those bags to landfill. And I understand some people think that, maybe that's not the greenest option, but at the same time, we don't want to be spreading garlic mustard throughout the compost and the, that people are buying. So in the Adopt-an-ESA program, we're going to take it to landfill. What you do at home, it's up to you. Just be forewarned that when you buy compost and soil and things, there is a chance there's going to be some invasives in it.
Mm-hmm. And is it legal or acceptable to pull garlic mustard in public parks? As an individual simply out for a walk, is it okay to pull a plant that I see and identifies garlic mustard, or is that not okay?
It depends on your city or town's municipal bylaws. In Toronto, unfortunately, it is not legal to damage a plant in any form, regardless of it being invasive or non-invasive. But we do have, in non-COVID times, we do have organized garlic mustard pulls that do happen in the city, and we do it through our crews as well.
Okay.
It's similar in London. That's why we have the Adopt-an-ESA program, so we can have folks like Rebecca who are trained to identify and control these plants following a plan through some kind of an agreement with the city. And that's what the Adopt-a-Patch program is going to be all about, is, you know, so that there's a map and people who are trained in ID, and we're helping folks, you know, do a good job of it and not having a negative impact, to make sure that, you know, we're well coordinated and folks are helping to protect these natural areas.
And what can we do to start initiatives like this in our own cities?
Well, for Toronto, I can only speak about us. I don't know if your city has a city website, if you can talk to your city councillors to put in a request. In Toronto, if you want to start a stewardship group, you would email Green Toronto, and the folks there might be able to set up a stewardship group for you in the area that you would like it set up.
Okay. Does compacting the soil after pulling help reduce germination? That's something I do when I'm pulling. I don't know if there have been any actual studies to show that helps. But anything where you can reduce the soil as little as possible, I think would be beneficial. If anyone else wants to weigh in. I'm trying to organize a garlic mustard pull near a local trail. Most likely it will be just myself because of COVID. Is the mega pile method the best method to dispose of large quantities of garlic mustard? I could place them in bags, but it is a trek.
I guess that's for me.
Yeah.
We do the mega pile method when we're dealing with a very large area that we're going to pull at one point in time, as well as when it is next to impossible to have 50 bags of garlic mustard to haul to the waste management facility. You don't completely get rid of the garlic mustard that way. You reduce its population. Then you can get it to a manageable amount, and that small amount you can then bag. In subsequent years, you'll get a much smaller population, and then that population you can pull and then bag and then take that to your waste management facility.
Also, just on we purchased a wagon. I know through the city you're doing larger scale, but when I was involved with something with Thames Talbot Land Trust, they had wagons to pull out bags of invasive plant garlic mustard from a forested area to the parking lot to remove it. And we also bought one in case we're on the trail removing invasives to take home with us from Kilally. But actually, usually the city, we're very fortunate, will pick up the bags that we accumulate.
Okay, and we have time just for one more very quick question. Unfortunately, we're out of time. For the cities of Toronto and London, do you or your volunteers control garlic mustard on private properties, or is it only on city property?
Sure, I'm happy to help. It's on public property. The idea is that folks are adopting these natural areas, and it's a community building activity that also helps protect and enhance the ecological integrity of natural areas that are publicly owned. And that's outlined in the London Invasive Plant Management Strategy. It speaks to controlling invasives on public lands, and on private lands, folks have access to the best management practices published by the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, and they can also retain professional contractors to help them manage invasives, similar to what the city does. We hire contractors to help us with a lot of invasive species management, but we're also fortunate that we can build community through events like Adopt-an-ESA and Adopt-a-Patch and other ways of engaging the community.
Okay, great. So we're out of time, unfortunately. There's a number of questions still. I think if you have any questions, please email either any of our panelists today. And we're really happy that all of you could join us. And thanks so much, Linda, Rebecca, and Nousheen for presenting today. I hope you all got a lot out of the webinar. And then just to do a quick note on Wednesday, there's another presentation, a webinar that I'm giving through the Canadian Council of Invasive Species tomorrow at 12. We'll be talking about the Grow Me Instead guide and the success of this program as something as the Grow Me Instead guides are really excellent for getting ideas for more native plants to grow and in place of invasive plants. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.